All right.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started again so we can get out of here. There you go. Once again, going through the typical project, you program it, select a consultant, obtain a federal aid agreement from the DOT, sign that, execute it, we'll return it. You do your environmental review, determine which permits you're going to need, work your way through preliminary design, coordinating with the railroads and utilities as you go along. Complete final design, acquire any right-of-way that you need. Submit the project to the District Local Systems Office for a final review, and that would in turn get the project put in for a letting. And after that, you go through the construction phase, and once the construction phase is done, you're at the point where you final closeout on a project. So closing out a project promptly is important for everybody, of course. Contractors, subcontractors, the LPA, and the DOT, and promptly closing it out is key in the whole process. That way the process doesn't linger, the project never becomes inactive, and we're not discussing things years after the contractor's gone home and the road's been open for traffic. So with that, we have Brian Cadis, the District 3 Local Systems Engineer, down from Sioux City to talk about the closeout process for highway projects.
Thank you, John. If I could do a little informal survey, how many are from county offices? Just raise your hands. Okay, how many are consultants? Okay, and how many are cities? Okay. The reason I asked for the survey is sometimes I work in these different entities here, and sometimes I get 3 different ways of trying to close out projects here. But this is kind of an overall broad brush way of how we try to close out local systems projects here. So in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about inspection and acceptance of fieldwork, pre-audit checklists and procedures, semi-final vouchers, pay estimates, construction and materials audits, final voucher and pay estimates, final form packet, and final payment and federal reimbursement, interest payment, project closeout. So, and if I go too fast for you, I plan to zip through this as quick as I can here. If I go too fast for it, a lot of these information I'm sharing with you is found in our IM 3.91 here. So in whatever possible time you may have here, feel free to read that there. As part of that IM, there's an attachment A, which gives a flow chart of the overall process for closing out projects here. Attachment B, which is what I'm going to be going over with you, is a final review and audit process for flow chart on highway and bridge construction. And these are typically bridges and highway projects that are required to follow DOT specifications here. And again, they're usually administered by our office, the local systems office here. Attachment C is a final review and audit process flowchart for non-highway construction DOT specification. And those are typically like trail projects there. They can be locally let projects there. And those are usually administered out of the system planning office. Attachment D, again, is very similar. It's final review and audit process flowchart for non-highway and non-DOT specifications here. A long time ago, when I started this position, we used to do depot restorations type project there, building restorations. I don't do that anymore, but the system planning folks do that there. And so that's what that is geared toward there. Attachment E, and I'll go over that a little bit, is a pre-audit checklist that's also available in our Word document. Attachment F is the final forms packet checklist. If I'm not mistaken, attachment E and attachment F applies not only to local systems projects, but they also apply to projects that are administered by the systems planning office as well. Deborah Arp, who followed me, will verify that there. So on with the attachment B flowchart process there. You guys are getting nearly completed with your work here, maybe a week or so away before the prime contractor leaves the office or leaves the project site. We'd like you to call the Office of Local Systems District Office and let us know, hey, we're getting really close to finishing up here. Can we do a site visit and maybe put together a punch list? So we'll visit the site, and it would be real helpful to have the local entities, myself, our local system staff, as well as the contractor. That way you're all on the same page about what needs to be completed to finish the project there. And the local entity is the one that's supposed to be taking all the notes there. So again, the engineer will have punch list item completed and notified. And when the contractor completes that project there, completes the punch list, they're supposed to notify me and let me know that the project is finished, the punch list is completed, and they send to me the final working day report. They also send what's called the statement of completion. We call it the 435, is our lingo is that we use there. It's the form 830435. And that's a heads up to us that we're ready to start the audit process here, the closeout process. Something to keep in mind there, though, is that when the local entity signs these 435, that starts the clock of when interest payment can start being accrued on that project there. I'll talk about that a little bit more down the road here, but just kind of keep that in mind when you sign those 435s there. I'll look at those 435s, and I'll look at the last working day report and make sure it agrees with what's in that 435 to make sure everything makes sense there. And if I'm happy with it, I'll sign it. I'll keep the original, but I'll send you guys at least 2 or 3 copies so you can have one for yourself, for your file, for the city or county, for the consultant, for the contractor there. And that just reiterate what I said there. Okay. Also, after the field work is done, the engineer, the local entities will need to start gathering their project files for district audit. I call it a district audit here. And this is where you go through your attachment E, and it's a 6-page attachment there. Not all of the items apply to all projects, but it's not just what's in that attachment E. There may be other stuff that are not listed in the attachment E that we may need, such as a public interest finding memo or maybe some unusual thing that we did to this project that were outside of the contract document that would need to be included in the project file there. While you're putting together, this is probably the hardest part, is putting all your materials review document put together there. You need to get your search from the contractor, rebars, where you get your cement, all those sort of things, all those documents there that we're looking for there. Once you have your audit list checked, all your documents put together, materials audit ready for submittal, you can send them all to our district office. And our district office will forward the materials office to our district materials office. Or if you want to just save time, you can go direct, at least in District 3, we allow you to directly submit the materials audit to our district materials folks there. It's a separate office from us. Some of them might be in the same building, but some of them might be in different buildings. Semi-final vouchers, pay estimates. This should begin, again, while you're doing your project audit here. This is where you need to check all your calculations here. Make sure you didn't use too many digits in your multiplications here. We've had seeding items that are $4,000 per acre, and it's usually like 2/10 of an acre, but they pay for 2 acres. So we need to get money back there, or somehow we need to recover that. So this is where you need to really check your math and all the document that's in your file. Then once the engineer has looked at all their project audit information, project files, quantities, what have you there, then they prepare the what we call the semi-final voucher. This is the quantities that you calculated after you've done your audit, after you've gone through the checklist there. And then before you send it to me, send it to the contractor, see if he agrees with the quantity. So many square yards of concrete, or so many acres of seeding, or so many yards of excavation, whatever those items are, have them look at it closely there. And if the contractor agrees with your quantity there and signs that, that's an indication to us that both the local entity and the contractor are ready for audit there. Okay. I guess a word of note there, this is a good time before it goes to me if there's any discrepancies between the contractor and the local entities there. Okay. Just kind of a word of note here. Before you pay the contractor completely for that bid item, make sure you have all the documents you need. We've had several, at least we've seen it in cities, as they go ahead and pay for the entire project itself, which they can do, but they put themselves at risk at paying too much for an item, and it's going to be very difficult for the contractor to be motivated to get them the documents that they want. And so if you don't have all the documents you need for a bid item, make sure you have that first before you pay them completely for that item there. Hope that makes sense there. Okay, some of these I've already covered here. And then, you know, after the contractor and the local entity, the engineer, come to an agreement on the quantity of that semi-final voucher, that's where I start my audit there. That's where we come out to your office. We'd like to come out to your office because you're going to have the information there. You don't have to ship it to the district office there, and we get less interruption if we go out to your office there. That's what I like to do. Anyway, I hope the other districts do the same thing too. Now, there are two types of audit that we do here. One is a detailed audit, which I think is what all projects is talking about. And the other one is a systems-based. A detailed audit is I go out and I look at every single page that you have in your project file. And I do the calculations. I see if the number makes sense to me. The systems-based is basically on County A, you had done 3 other projects before I did this audit, and you didn't have any issues whatsoever. It was perfect. You got an A+. I might just forego doing a detailed audit and just saying, we'll just call that a systems-based audit. But I won't tell you in advance what I'm going to do as systems or what's detailed or anything, because I still want you to put all your paperwork together there as carefully as possible. So, and then on the detailed side of it, I'm just going to look at the same checklist as you guys look at there on that attachment E. And a word of note is I do have in our file, in my file, a sample attachment E with the corresponding documents that you guys are welcome to look at if you want to ask for it. I would, I guess I would go to either Donna or John and say, hey, Brian said something about having a sample document. Go to them and they'll contact me and I'll make sure that you get it there. It's a pretty large file, but I think it's a really helpful tool to show you what we're looking for in your project files. So again, I go through your list there. I go through the attachment E and I say, yep, wait a minute, something happened here, something's not signed. I will list those items out in the what we call the final payment estimate, or the 301. That's another DOT lingo that we use. It's a 301. I try not to look for discrepancy, but if there is some, I will note those and put that in the 301 form. Then I'll send it out to the engineer. Okay, as far as the materials audit, I don't think they have a checklist as detailed as ours does, but if there are some items missing, they will contact you personally saying, where are the plant reports, or where are your certs for the curing compound, or they'll ask you to forward that. I meant to ask this in the very beginning here. Has anybody talked about Doc Express yet? Is anybody aware of Doc Express? Okay, we're really excited about that tool being available. We hope, will help you organize electronically these documents here, materials document as well as your project files there. And that's something that will help us to do the project audit within our office, if possible, but some of us like to get out of the office and go out to your site as well, but it's an excellent organizing tool to have there. So to look in your email and follow up on that, because that's going to be an excellent tool. We've already been applying it to our highway primary projects there. These are multi-million dollar, $10, $20 million projects that we've used there. So something to look into as far as tools for organizing your files there. Again, they'll also document any discrepancy if they're looking for it. They may contact you personally. So we'll send the 301 back to the local entities, the engineers, and you can take corrective actions there, or we can just say, these are things that we noted, and in our district file, unless we say specifically, please send something back or please follow up, all we ask is that you take corrective actions and then sign it. You don't have to send us a copy of the missing certified labor report or anything like that, or inspections or what have you there. We just want you to verify that you corrected it. Okay. Hopefully this doesn't happen too often, but sometimes due to calculations errors, there will be some quantities that may need to be corrected there, or there may need to be a change order for the planned quantity items there. Those are the common things that we encounter there. Okay. Some of them I kind of jump ahead a little bit. I hope it makes sense there. So again, I send the 301 to the local agencies. They make the corrections, and if there's a change in quantity, you have to go back to the contractor again and say, oh, by the way, we changed this quantity on this bid item here, so double check this and make sure we got it right here. And I would suspect 99 out of 100 times the engineer or the contractor will agree with your numbers, especially if it goes up. So I don't think you'll have a problem there. So if the contractor agrees with it, he'll sign it, send it back to you guys, and then if you have everything that you received from that the contractor, be it certification, materials, documents, payrolls, BBE forms, anything that is required of that project there, if you receive everything you need from that contractor, that's when the day zero for interest payment starts there. Just a note on interest payment, I don't encounter that very often there. We try to help you and say, well, wait till you get everything from the contractor before you start that day zero count there. And we try to save that for the last there. As far as like if you do the voucher for your FM accounts or FM projects there, I don't think they encounter it too often. If they do, they get mad and they blame me for it. So I try to explain that to them. I haven't gotten mad at very often yet, so I think we're doing pretty good on that aspect there. Okay. So this is kind of getting into the attachment F there. At District 3 office, usually we will send with our 301s a copy of the attachment F, and we'll highlight the items that you need to submit for final package there. So it could be a final voucher or a final estimate, a copy of a canceled check if you're being reimbursed for something you already paid for. It could be a DBE or subcontractor payments, or interest payment form. Those are kind of the things that are spelled out in the attachment F. And we also have sample copies of attachment F if you'd like to have a copy for your records as well, how we do it. So we will review the final package from that list that's shown in attachment F there. And we'll send that materials document, the 436, we'll send that to district materials. Make sure they double check they have everything they need. If they sign it, they send it back to me. And then I usually don't question their signatures there. I just sign it right after them. That means I check with materials there basically. And then if materials is taken care of there, then I'm usually going to approve the final voucher. And I'll sign the 436, and I'll send you copies similar to change orders. I'll send you like 2 or 3 copies, one for yourself, and one for the contractor, one for the consultant if there's a consultant applied to that project there. We will send the original signed 436, the original signed vouchers, the original signed 435 to Office of Finance. There's people in our office that likes the originals. Maybe that'll change down the road here, but for now, we need original hard copies at the district office there. And they will process the payments for you. There's different ways to do it there. And in this particular statement there, they'll pay it from your FM account, and later on that will be credited with federal aid, whatever was granted for that particular project there. It's a little different on city projects there. The city has to pay for the project, and then we reimburse the city. And that's basically what I talked about there. I told you this was going to be fast. Okay, this is interest payment, and I have to admit, I don't do very much of this. I don't like it, to be honest. I try to get things done as possible, quick as possible. If you send everything to me that's attachment F, I'm going to try to get that through within 2 or 3 weeks after I receive it. So we try to turn it around pretty quick. I suspect the other district offices are very similar. They don't like to delay. They like to get this closed out just like you do. So here they talk about the interest payment. I'm just going to buzz right through this. We do have information on IM 3.93. Another quick survey. Has anybody ever had to make interest payments on their federal aid projects? Good. Good. You don't want to do that. Now, on the side here, there are federal aid projects where you're eligible to receive reimbursement for consultant services. You're eligible to receive reimbursement for railroad costs, for utility costs, and for in-house engineering costs. Now, we'll go ahead and pay for the contractor completely for your work, and we'll reimburse the city for it, but we're going to do some internal audits among ourselves over these items here. And I just had an experience recently where we did an audit on consultant service there. And we come to find out that the city had asked for too much. And how we found that out is I called the consultant and said, hey, what happened with this bill? And said, yeah, it was over too much, and we ended up paying the city back for that service there. And they sent me a copy of their check that they sent to the city. So it ended up, we billed the city for being paid too much for that. So those things happen sometimes. It's very rare. I would say 1 in 100 times that has happened to me, but they do happen. Okay, so after all the audits are done on these construction costs, consultants, railroad, utilities, and in-house, one thing I didn't notice in here was right-of-way. I think we do stuff in right-of-way because I know I've reimbursed cities for right-of-way costs here, so you might keep that in the back of your mind there. Anyway, after we've done all the audit and everything clears up, the Office of Finance is going to amend this project on the federal, what we call the Federal Management Information System. I guess they had an initial cost of what the project was, And then there's a final cost of what the project was there. And it's just kind of a tracking for them to know that everything was completed on that project there. And you may have originally started out with $100,000, but you ended up getting $120,000 in federal aid. That's basically what it is. It's just for them to help keep track of why it was amended and all that sort of thing. FHWA, before they sign it, they have to review it and say, well, wait a minute, why was this changed here? Why did it go up $20,000 here? So sometimes I'll get a call from FHWA saying, Brian, do you have information on this document here or on this aspect of the work? Or why did they do what they did there? Hopefully I have that record there. Or sometimes I'll call the local entity and hopefully they have the record too. And so once the FHWA approves it, you are supposed to get that amended copy. That's the official document that says this project is closed out. If you don't have that document, it's not officially closed out. It's still active. And there's kind of a danger in that. I got a project that's 7 years old. That's not good. That's not good at all. And they're in danger of having to return some money because they are missing a lot of documents there from the plant reports there. We started out reimbursing the city for everything they did on their projects there. But as we went through the audit process, and just through circumstances, change in personnel, priorities changed, I suppose, on the city's side. It just got delayed and delayed and delayed. And in my mind, the longer you delay closing out the project, the more you risk losing your federal aid projects there. So the more you can be on top of trying to get those project documents closed out, the better off you'll be there. You probably have been called by the local agencies about inactive project status there. Say, we haven't seen any funding activity for 6 months. Can you start making some payments in here? What's the reason for the delay here? Sometimes cities will say, well, we wanted to pay at the end of the project or we want a reimbursement at the end of the project. Well, FHWA would like to see some activity just so they show that their money is being used. And so that's another thing to keep in mind about these project closeout here. Closeout to me, I hope you've been paying careful attention to Brenda about all the document that goes with it, because that's the culmination of what we do is we follow up on what if you've been following what Brenda is saying about documenting your projects there. So again, once you have that official document in your file, hang on to it for at least 3 years. I've heard horror stories. I haven't seen it happen in Iowa, but I've heard horror stories that if you have that document in your file and FHWA comes out to your office within 3 years and finds discrepancies, they can take some dollars away. Fortunately, it hasn't happened that I'm aware of there. Joe, maybe? Okay, I'm glad to hear that. So we're doing good. Let's keep that 100% record going there, if we could there. And this is just distribution of that final document, who receives it. The city receives it, the district planner receives it, the regional planning agency and metropolitan planning organization receive them as well for their records there. I buzzed through that pretty quick there. I hope you got a sense of what we're trying to look for when we do project closeouts there. I think I'm going to let John go ahead and go on to the next one. I'll be around here for another hour or so. If you have questions about project closeouts or if you want to hear some horror stories, I'm happy to share with you there. But I'll let John continue. Thank you very much.
Did anyone have any questions real quick for Brian? Okay. And to finish off the day, we have Craig Markley, the Director of the Office of Systems Planning. He's going to be talking about closing out non-highway projects, so all of the small grants, programs, and other miscellaneous projects that we do. So I'll let Craig go ahead and take it.
Great, thanks, John. Yeah, sometimes the microphone gets a little far away from me, so just raise your hand if you can't hear me. But so non-highway projects, What we're talking about there, so back in 2003 is when the Office of Systems Planning got involved in project development. Prior to that, our office, about 1/4 of which is devoted to grant programs. So those are the RISE programs that you've heard about, the economic development. So putting a road into an industrial park. It's state recreational trails, federal recreational trails, the old transportation enhancements, the new transportation alternatives, safe routes to school, byways, I with clean entertainment. Those are all grant programs that systems planning. Prior to 2003, we took applications from cities, counties, worked with them, getting the applications reviewed, went to our commission. Once the commission approved a project, then it went out to the district. So then folks like Brian, they were the ones that were responsible for actually working on getting the project built. So back in the early 2000s, the DOT went through a reorganization, and it was determined, it might be a good idea to have systems planning manage all of those grant programs from cradle to grave. So not only just get the applications from folks, but also help you work through the project development process as well. So what I'm going to talk about is the differences that are inherent with being managed out of systems planning, and the fact that they are a little different. They're not building a road, they're not building a bridge in most cases, so there are different little nuances there. A lot of them related to materials and in-kind as well. So, okay, so process differences. You heard Brian talk about the district local systems engineer signs these forms. Well, in the case of the projects that systems planning has, it's going to be either the project manager who you deal with, or it's going to be myself signing the forms. And then another difference is, so if it's a project that's using local specifications, city or county, it's not using DOT specs, then instead of the 435 form, it's going to be the 64003 form, which is set up about the same way. And then as far as final audits, so we're not required to final audit every project, but we found out early on it's a pretty good idea. Again, we're dealing with, in a lot of cases, we're dealing with projects that maybe a community is not used to doing a federal aid job. So they're not used to the whole day's worth of stuff that you've been involved in today. It's just not, they're just not used to it. So it's very critical that we go out and we review every single project. As far as materials acceptance, in dealing, the sources, the inspections, the certifications, and all of that. So really, the projects that we deal with are fall into two categories, and there's only one in category one, and that's the Iowa's Clean Entertainment program projects. All the rest of them are category two, and so we require that you to follow the material IMs, and that you have for category one, you're required to have the district materials engineer involved in that, just the way that category is set up. So on all Iowa's Clean Entertainment projects, you need to be working closely with the district materials engineer. And we don't do a ton of those ICAP projects. A lot of them deal with transit related, buying a bus or helping with bus routes. But there's a fair number of them that are traffic signal interconnects, could be intersection improvement, could be adding turn lanes. So in those cases, you're definitely going to need to be talking to the district materials engineer, providing them all of the necessary documentation so that at the end of the project, he or she can sign off on that 436 form. For all of the other projects, the category twos, so all of the trails and all of the other types of projects, our office will sign off on. So that's a little difference there. Let's see. And then as far as the Category 2 type projects that are let using local specs, again, that 64003 form, that only covers you on not only on the 435, but it also covers you on the materials side of it as well. So that's I think it's a pretty handy form. It kind of kills two birds with one stone there. So then in-kind contributions. This is a pretty popular and actually a pretty powerful concept. So as far as what it is and who can donate, so it has to be from a third party. So what is that? So if the project sponsor is the City of Ames, so that means that the City of Ames cannot donate to the project. Now, Story County could certainly donate to the project. Also, the Iowa DOT, we cannot donate to projects. But all other different organizations, they can, they can have workers go out and plant trees or donate trees or do work, but and then that value is then credited towards the non-federal share. Probably the most widely used in kind is donated railroad right-of-way. So we built a lot of trails here recently, and the purchase of the railroad right-of-way. So we work with a lot of times the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation. They'll buy the property, and then they'll try to get cities or counties to buy that from them. So the railroads, they're interested in getting as much as they can for that corridor. But in some instances, the value of that property is more than what they're willing to take. So they'll take less than what the true value is. So what they do is they get tax credit on that. So the federal government gives them a break on their taxes for that donated value that they provide. Because it does help with them, if they've got a 20-mile long rail corridor, and the railroads don't always own that entire corridor. How it was set up is some of it was fee title that they actually purchased, some of it they just had easement to, so they can't sell the easement property. It has to go through the rail banking, which rail banking then says it has to be used for trail. So, so sometimes it's in their best interest, if they don't have a lot of fee title property, for them to work with like Natural Heritage Foundation, cities and counties in order to dispose of that. Also, if you're trying to sell a lot of fee title property, you have to deal with a lot of different landowners, and that would increase their cost. So again, it's cheaper for them to kind of cut us a break, donate some of that value. Now what that donation does is it allows the locals to then use that value, and in some instances they don't even have to come up with any cash for their project. So again, very powerful concept. So what are the types of things that can be kind of in kind? I just talked about the right-of-way, and in different materials, equipment, labor, and professional services. If you got an engineer that wants to donate their time to do the plans or do the CE work, that's certainly allowable. And so when can contributions be made? So with right-of-way, any time within reason, we can't go back too far. Materials, equipment, and labor, that all has to happen before federal highway we have to. You can't count until after federal highway authorization. Get that mixed up. So got to make sure we work through all of that process and before we get too far. So how is in-kind approved? The local public agency, they make a request to our office, and we take a look at the supporting documentation. If they say we're going to donate a 2-inch caliber tree and it's worth $1,000, well, I don't know. You can go to pretty much any nursery and get a 2-inch caliber tree for a couple $100. So it has to be reasonable. And so we review that request. We forward that on to Federal Highway, and with our FEMA's authorization request. And then Federal Highway signs off on it, and then we notify the LPA that it's been approved. So again, how is it applied to the non-federal share? As Brian talked about, it's all cost reimbursement. So the locals, they incur the costs. They write the checks to engineering firms. They write the checks to the contractors, and then they take a copy of that canceled check, send it in with the reimbursement form. If there's any in-kind on it, then we can apply that at that point in time and take care of that local match. Again, the instance or the example I gave where sometimes you can do a project without any local cash match, that's only if you have enough federal aid to cover the actual cost. So it's a pretty rare, but sometimes it happens. As far as verification, we'll come out during construction, and then we'll come out obviously post-construction, and we'll take a look. And if you said you're going to plant 10 trees and we're only seeing 5 or what have you, we're not going to give you credit for the 10. So obviously we'd be an adjustment on that reimbursement. And went through that pretty quick, but again, if there's any questions that anybody might have, it is a little different animal, but we're involved in several projects.
So my question is, everything that Brenda talked about in reference to all the little surveys of employees and everything, that stuff's still occurring. This is just the audits is going to be different at the end, or the closing at the end is going to be different. Are we still required to do the interviews with contractors, subs?
Interviews.
Brenda was talking about the wage rate interviews.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah,
yep,
we have to do all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just the closing stuff that's a little bit different between the.
Well, it is. I mean, the closing's pretty much the same. I guess the difference is we touch every project during construction as much as we can. Sometimes some of our trail projects, it might only be a 10-day project. And if it doesn't work out for our inspector to come out, then we may miss it, but that's pretty rare. So we attend again, as much as we can, every pre-construction meeting. We just found it beneficial to sit down. We've put together a packet of forms that lays out everything. There's some differences between our, projects answer systems planning versus districts. So over the years, we've determined what those differences are, and what things might be beneficial to review, like change order forms and things like that. So we have a checklist we go through. So it's really nice to sit across the table from sponsor, from the engineer, and us and the contractor, and sit down and go, okay, this is the form that's going to be required, and when. You're going to have to do, you're going to have to do those interviews. We're going to be out during construction at least once. We're going to see you for the final audit. Yep. Sure.
All right. Well, thank you, Craig. So real quickly, we'll conclude today. Couple things. Just want to thank Tammy for all her help with the audio video stuff, and Gail Nordholm, our secretary, for getting everyone checked in and making all the other arrangements that needed to happen behind the scenes today. But 10 things to leave you with. First one, read the federal aid guide and the applicable IMs. That answers a lot of questions up front, and really more than likely it'll answer a lot of questions, and it helps focus any other remaining questions you have when you call one of us. That guide is only about 20-25 pages. It is a quick read. So there's the website for it. Contact your administering office. Your administering office, that'd be your district local systems engineer, that'd be your contact in systems planning. They're your primary point of contact unless you're otherwise told. Make sure your project is programmed. This is a big one. Anything that's not in been programmed by the RPA or the MPO, it's not in the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, which gets rolled up into our statewide Transportation Improvement Program, the STIP. It's not a project according to Federal Highway. You can go through all the steps. If that project is not in the STIP, when it comes time to authorize it for construction, it's not going to receive any federal funds, and there'll be a delay in getting that project into the STIP, and that could be a couple of months and potentially could push your project into the next year. Use TPMS. If you're not already signed up for this, talk to your district local systems engineer, talk to Steve DeVries at the Iowa County Engineers Association. His contact information's there. You get yourself signed up. Know when to submit your documents and what to submit. IM 3.005, that is a checklist. It has all the primary turn-in check deadlines, when check plans are due, when all the intermediate steps are due leading up to a letting. Follow it. It really helps. Submit your concept statement early. Again, the earlier you get information to us, the sooner we can start acting on it, the more likely we'll be able to keep your project on track. Coordinate with railroads and utilities early. We've said this quite a bit. Harlan was here kind of talking about it from a railroad perspective. The sooner you talk to them, the better off you are. If you can talk, and it doesn't, you don't need, if you're talking to them for the first time at check plan stage, you're going to have delays. If you can talk to them when you have a preliminary set of plans, it's a lot easier to move things around at that point in the project. Don't start final design too soon. Don't begin until you've received FHWA environmental concurrence. Development of check plans is considered a final design activity. What that means is if you turn in check plans to us, you turn in a nice document that says check plans across the top, and we don't have environmental concurrence, that the feds view that as proceeding without NEPA clearance. That would invalidate your entire project. You'd lose your federal aid on that project. So again, it's very important not to do that. And here we go. MAP 21 provided that additional flexibility that we talked about, purchasing right away at risk. And we went over that earlier. So again, we just talked about that. Don't start right away too early. I mean, you can go ahead and purchase right away at risk, and there's also a procedure for if you need to purchase it as a, I can't remember the exact terms, an emergency purchase, basically. If there's a developer coming in, you need that road for the future right-of-way, we have a procedure for that as well. And talk to Rick Skinner. He's a great contact in our right-of-way office to help you navigate that process. And request and verify receipt of federal aid authorization. Don't begin any work that you want federal aid reimbursement for until you've heard from us that you have federal highway authorization. It's a phone call. It's real simple. We can send you back an email. But talk to us first if you have any questions about it, because we can't go back after the fact and get authorized for something in the past. So thank you very much. We appreciate you taking the time. It's a lengthy time, but we hope it's worthwhile.